for attending today's Safeguard Your Organization Against Cyber Attack webinar. Today, Rob Villano, CCSI Cybersecurity Practice Manager, will be presenting. And for those of you not familiar with CCSI, I know many of you are customers, but for some that may not, we've been in business since 1974, and our core competencies consist of several different silos. One is infrastructure, which incorporates the data center, could be core switching, IPT, wireless, disaster recovery, video surveillance, access control, new data center builds. We also offer customized hardware maintenance offerings. So 24/7, break fix, street on the feet, have your configurations type service. We also do 24/7 application monitoring solutions. And as many of you know, we're a MSP, so we're a managed service provider, and we're also a managed security provider with our SOC. And today, Rob will be discussing a lot of what we call our Threat Protect security offerings. So for any questions during today's call, please message them to our webinar host, Catherine Irizarry. And then following today's event, a survey will be sent. For all completed surveys, you will receive a complimentary Starbucks gift card. We really appreciate you giving us feedback, letting us know about the content, but also let us know about what you'd like to hear in the future. You know, what keeps you up at night? You know, what are you hearing about internally? You know, any concerns that you have? You know, security is on everyone's mind these days. So at this point, I'd like to take this opportunity and introduce everyone to Rob Villano of CCSI.
Appreciate that, Joe, and thanks for the introduction. Welcome, everyone. Appreciate everyone joining today for our webinar. We're delighted to present to you Safeguarding Your Organization Against Cyber Attack. My name is Rob Villano, and I'm the Cybersecurity Practice Manager here at CCSI. We're going to be focusing on managed endpoint protection and managed firewall services today. So a little bit about me and my background. I'm a data privacy advocate. I specialize in safeguarding the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of highly sensitive data. I have over 20 years of experience with information security, security architecture, review, and executing risk assessments for a number of organizations, but more specifically, those organizations that are highly regulated, and I've helped them to achieve regulatory compliance. I hold multiple information security certifications, and I enjoy advising and collaborating and helping clients with information security best practices. I can be contacted at rvillano@ccsinet.com, and would love to hear from you and chat with you on any of your cybersecurity or information security needs. So let's begin. So 3 takeaways for today I'd like us to focus on, and that is managed endpoint detection and response, what it is and how it works. We'll take a look at that as the webinar develops. Managed services differentiation, right? We at CCSI believe our differentiators are people, process, and technology, and the confluence of all 3 to deliver these services. Also, the third item would be managed services integration, right? You can really use this in a layered approach to improve your cybersecurity defenses, and we'll get into that as the webinar develops as well. So let us begin. What is or are managed endpoint protection, right? So it's really a consolidation of your endpoint device security into a single function, which is really efficient for IT in that it takes what we call anti-X, right? Anti-X is antivirus, spyware, malware. That gets consolidated into one function. And there's a firewall component with that, as well as specific application control. And then, interestingly, we can put in host intrusion prevention and behavioral blocking capabilities all in one package for the analysts to have really excellent visibility into what's going on their endpoints, and to be able to deliver control of their endpoints very efficiently. So the integration with other security solutions is also a benefit for managed endpoint protection. You can integrate your vulnerability scan, your patch management, your configuration management, which ultimately leads to a thorough defense in depth enterprise security strategy to strengthen your overall cybersecurity posture. Your endpoint attributes are evaluated against your predefined security rules. Here at CCSI, we call those runbooks. We develop them for our clients. And then we have a managed service via our central server where logs are collected, activity reports are available in the cloud to our clients, again, to provide for excellent visibility 24/7, 365 of all of your enterprise endpoints. And so how does this technology work? Well, endpoint detection or response technology relies on a pre-infection phase and then a post-infection phase. And so they're very distinct in their components and what they do. So on the pre-infection phase, you want to discover and predict, and that's part of the AI that's utilized, artificial intelligence. And then ultimately, you want to prevent any sort of infection in a real-time sense, and that's where blocking gets in. That's where the disabling of ports, disabling of services that can be achieved through specific runbook activity, and that's up to the clients, our clients, to define. We work with them very closely to do so. As part of the post-infection phase, there's a detection and diffuse. So if you do detect something, you want to contain it, right? You don't want these things moving laterally to infect other endpoints. And then there's a respond and remediate if an endpoint is infected. Again, it's part of correcting what just happened as well as containing it as well. Benefits are rather obvious here, right? We use, as I mentioned, machine learning as well as artificial intelligence with our next generation antivirus capability to detect and mitigate zero-day activities and attacks. Those are key because by definition, 0 days are unknown. They don't have remedies per se, but there are certain types of behaviors that AI and machine learning can detect. And so we block malicious connections, so as it were, command and control. These events are logged, we can review afterwards. We prevent, obviously, the keys to your kingdom, your very sensitive data from exfiltration by identifying in real time any malicious outgoing communications, the command and control that I spoke about earlier. And then we understand legitimate outgoing communications that must pass through your operating system, and we safeguard those as well. So these are the benefits of EDR technology. So let's look at EDR Security Operations Center examples. Here at CCSI, we have a fully staffed 24/7, 365 Security Operations Center. Some of the examples that we use for managing endpoint detection and response are the following. We'll get involved in protecting against process-based threats, right? So if someone's looking to elevate privileges on your endpoint, we can spot that and immediately go into protect and detect and protect mode and prevent those from happening. We prevent process hijacking with what's called thread execution. Folks, those bad actors can get involved if they are inside your network and hijack certain threads and processes. We can prevent against that. Blocking adware, unwanted applications, and even crypto miners, which are insidious in nature and lead to ransomware. We block unauthorized Windows registry edits, right, which are key because that leads to other infections in your enterprise. We block unauthorized PowerShell scripts. PowerShell is a wonderful tool if used by the good guys. Bad guys typically use this to infect your network in a significant way. And then finally, to prevent ransomware, we'll block file encryptors associated with ransomware activity. All done on the endpoint, all done centrally, all can be detected with endpoint solutions and managed endpoint detection. So EDR components. I wanted to speak today a little bit about what is involved in an EDR infrastructure, or endpoint detection and response infrastructure? Folks have asked, so I thought I'd just give a little bit of background into how this comes about from an enterprise architecture perspective. And we begin, quite frankly, with what's called, in a generic sense, a collector, and it's installed on each device's operating system. And it receives its configuration from the aggregator. The aggregator has all information passed through it and understands what and how this collector should be configured. The core provides for request authorization, what we call pass, or blocks traffic according to the collector. And what the core does is legitimize requests that are allowed outside of your network, and then malicious exfiltration attempts are blocked. And these are all recorded in what's called an event viewer on the Windows endpoint. The collector sends the aggregator registration information, when this is important, via SSL, and then sends ongoing health and status information. Obviously, we want to use an encrypted channel because we don't want the bad guys interfering or intercepting that information. As we move along, the final components are the central server, where software is used on a central web interface, and a back-end server for analyzing these events, and it does so by controlling, configuring system behavior, monitoring these events, and performing what we call deep forensic analysis of any issues, and we monitor the system status and health. A lot is done by the central server. It's probably the most important component of this infrastructure. I have a diagram which I'll show you in a moment, and you'll see how this works. A cloud service is a threat intelligence service, and it provides for visibility, it provides event classification, analysis. You can utilize sandboxing if you'd like with the cloud service. You can determine flow analysis via the component's machine learning, which is really important. And you can conduct commonalities analysis, so what's common to one infection versus another. It's really a great tool that you can use as I mentioned, a threat intelligence service to understand what's happening internally on your endpoints. So here's the diagram that I prepared, and it's really in 3 phases, and we'll step through it as we move. And so first and foremost, you have number 1, which is, and these are your endpoints, folks, right? So, you have that collector which logs, endpoint logs are sent to, and it collects a myriad of information internally on your infrastructure. And then you move to, it is VPN to the central server that I had mentioned. So you have a VPN connection, so there can't be man-in-the-middle attacks. This is all secure channel to a central server. And that's where we pick it up, and our analysis begins, our administrator analysis. If we're doing the managed service for you and we're monitoring 24/7, 365, our analysts will go and be connected securely to that central server and pick up all of that information for analysis, right? And that's where the triaging goes, and that's where we alert and respond via runbooks, depending on the services that are subscribed to. And so what does it all look like? Well, from a health perspective, it looks like this. The dashboard is very clear. You see events on the left, some described as malicious, some as described as likely safe. You get a communication control, in a sense, on what vulnerabilities may be out there, and your communication from your various endpoints. The collectors that are running from a health perspective, what's happening on them, okay? So you get a full visibility into your enterprise from that perspective. From an IT perspective, you want these folks and endpoints to be up and running. And then you get typically what's most targeted, right? And so you get a view of that as well. And then any external destinations, which are important these days, given the international events that are happening across the globe these days. And then system components, right? So you'll be able to see those as well, how they're performing within your environment. Really an important dashboard that you can look into via Cloud Tenant, and it provides a really nice capability if you want to manage these things on your own. So let's talk a little bit, as I mentioned earlier, managed firewall services. And so I think as part of a defense in depth strategy, endpoint protection as well as managed firewall services are key. And so these are two important components to ensure that your enterprise is appropriately safeguarded. And so how are firewall ports disabled? Very simply put, they're on the client firewall as part of a NOC managed service, right? So we'll help you manage your firewall. We'll also get involved in integrating that with your endpoint protection if you wish. If threats are observed, firewall ports are closed. CCSI will recommend the action to the clients. We'll create a change ticket. We'll execute change and after client authorization. CCSI has the ability to isolate hosts in the endpoint detection response process using our web UI. Security policies can be created with benefit and consultation with the client to isolate hosts automatically. That's the runbook process that we spoke about earlier, but this is all done collaboratively with the client to ensure that there's an understanding on how we're going to proceed based on any threats. As I mentioned earlier, we're a fully managed service. The dashboard allows the client to view all events within their environment. There's security settings, inventory, an event viewer, and communication and control from the collective group. We saw that earlier on the dashboard. And so managed firewall services are broken up into a couple of different packages, and we call them unified threat management. We offer multiple layers of network security, including application intelligence, which is that next-gen firewall that we talked about, IPS, our anti-X capabilities, which is anti-malware, antivirus, and VPN spam and URL filtering for web content. So there's three packages: there's base, action, and advanced. I thought I'd present this to give you a sense on options that are available. And so we're happy to discuss these with you. They build upon each other, as you can see. You can even subscribe to our SIM, which is a series of log analytics for additional and advanced analytics, reporting. We'll even manage it from a standpoint of upgrades and advisory monitoring and corrections. So it's really the service is designed to meet whatever needs you may have from your own enterprise or a budgetary perspective. And so we know here that hackers don't sleep, but we say at CCSI, neither do we. And quite frankly, we don't. We're a 24/7, 365 network activity monitoring shop. That's our SOC. Our signature product is called Threat Protect. We've designed it so that services are aligned with NIST cybersecurity framework, where we're going to provide for identification, protection, detection, response, and recovery from any cybersecurity threats that you may face. These services are specific in nature, and they look like this. There's an objective, a service, and then a deliverable that we provide. So first and foremost, if you want to protect your critical assets, we'll look at providing and collaborating with you for endpoint detection and response. We also have network detection and response, which is on the wire to understand what packets may be malicious in nature. That's our Threat Protect services. And our SIM, where you can have additional visibility into your endpoints regarding log services and understanding what's taking place in a more advanced procedure and process. And so the next objective would be, if you want to prevent unauthorized access, managed firewalls where you want to look at. And so we reviewed that a little bit earlier. We'll manage your rule sets, we'll take over the performance and be responsible for it, and we'll provide maintenance for your firewalls on a subscription basis. We basically take those chores out of your hands, we put them in ours, and are accountable for them. We offer the network penetration testing to be able to perform a network penetration test to define your network strengths and weaknesses. for remediation during that course of testing. We offer retesting so that you have the ability to correct any misconfigurations and ultimately provide for network strength in your enterprise. As we mentioned earlier, the vulnerability scanning and patch management are part of your cyber hygiene posture and to provide for proper endpoint configuration. We offer those services to ensure that you are appropriately patching your endpoints, you understand the weaknesses that exist in your network, and you have an appropriate patch cadence to avoid any threats that may ultimately exploit any of your endpoints. We also provide for security incident tabletop exercises, what we call cybersecurity resilience. We conduct a scenario. We provide for various scenarios to our clients to conduct a security incident tabletop exercise. We gather your security incident response team. We work with them very closely to question and challenge them on understanding what they would do in certain scenarios. We document their responses. We provide for a report. We collaborate with your security incident response teams to ensure that they're aware of any weaknesses within their plan, and we look to strengthen the plan during the course of this service. And then finally, we have what is integral to any cybersecurity hygiene function, which is the cybersecurity risk assessment. We want to document your current state of cybersecurity risk based on an evaluation of your infrastructure, your program, your policies, your procedures, your day-to-day, if you will, and your IT security systems that you have in place. Again, we'll provide a final report. We'll document any risks that exist. We'll provide recommendations, not only recommendations, but solutions that you may be interested in so that you can plan on having improved cybersecurity by taking those recommendations and ultimately making plans to implement them. And so here at CCSI, we believe that our differentiation for our services is what we call people, process, and technology. We have 50 engineers on staff. They have various levels of certifications. They're certified in SOC, most importantly. We've been in business, as Joe mentioned, since 1974, so just about 48 years these days. And so we've seen just about every cycle you can imagine in IT and the economy. We have our processes which have been tested and determined to be successful and aligned with industry best practices. We offer quarterly threat reviews, custom runbooks, as I mentioned earlier. We'll work with you on budget and will ultimately fully manage your enterprise if required. Our technology is best in breed. We rely on many of the services which speak to what industry standards are and industry best practices and the latest and greatest technology available to keep the bad guys out. We will not offer you technologies just for the sake of technology's sake, but we'll work with your existing solutions to provide for a synergy with your current installs. And then finally, we'll offer risk assessments for any critical assets and concerns that you may have to improve technology solutions in those areas as well. And so on an integrated basis, we believe these differentiators form this diagram, which looks at from our security engineering to our defense in-depth overlay, where we're doing risk assessments. We're looking at what your critical assets are and what the risks may be. We have our local SOC, as I mentioned, on Long Island and Bohemia. We offer best-in-breed technology. Those custom runbooks are important, so they're created to meet your expectations. And we manage. We don't just monitor, we manage. We'll bring certain items to your attention quickly and thoroughly. And ultimately, our goal is to provide you with best-in-breed service to improve the defense in-depth strategy for your existing network. And so our Security Operations Center here on Long Island, located in Bohemia, It's a SOC 2 Type 2 certified security operations center. That means that it has been tested for the confidentiality, integrity, and availability by the AICPA SOC, which is a governing body that regulates and provides for these types of oversight for these audits. We are SOC 2 Type 2 certified in that regard. And so we have, as I mentioned, our certified IT professionals, both in IT and security. We're proud of the awards that we have achieved. We're a member of the HIA Long Island Association, and we've been voted a number of times one of the top places on Long Island to work. And so our strategy for cybersecurity is thorough. And as I mentioned, we align with the NIST cybersecurity framework that was created in 2014. And so it's thorough, it's technology agnostic. It begins with the identification of your inventory and is completed by recovery of your assets. All of these services that we offer here align with those areas. And so you can see from our security assessments and tabletop exercises all the way to our managed endpoint and managed email, as well as firewall. There's a specific solution that fits within this framework for you. And we collaborate with you very closely to define these and offer you those solutions for the weaknesses that you may have within your environment. We're happy to have these discussions with you. The NIST CSF framework has been well received in the industry and for any industry, quite frankly, and it works quite well for us and for our clients. And so with that, that concludes the discussion today. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have and look forward to providing any responses.
Yeah, we got a few questions in, Rob. Can you answer this one first? What are the best cybersecurity investments to prevent a cyber attack and its impact?
Well, I think in general, cybersecurity hygiene, right, is really important these days. So I think if you have budgetary monies and you want to use them efficiently, it's best to provide for those cyber hygiene services, such as what we mentioned here: endpoint detection and response, network detection and response, vulnerability scanning, network penetration tests, patch management, configuration management. Those are all things that lead to reducing risk within your environment. These other solutions that are rely on additional technologies are really, really good, and I don't want to minimize them. But it's often that the unpatched endpoint or the employee or vendor that was not removed from the system access-wise is what often causes problems and threats that manifest themselves into infections. And so it's that good, strong cybersecurity hygiene that goes a long way to reducing risk within environments.
Thanks, Rob. The next question I have is, what design principles are important for containing an outbreak?
Well, I think that, first and foremost, you really want to understand from an inventory perspective, what endpoints are out there. It sounds fundamental, but you'd be surprised. You want to understand your data flows. You want to understand what data is on what, certain networks. You really want to understand your critical assets and to identify all of them so you have a response if there are threats and ultimately infections. This goes to your cybersecurity or your security incident response plan, as well as your DR plan. Backups are critically important because if you have a way of restoring your data, then an infection can be recovered from, obviously. And not only that, you can thwart any of those bad actors that present these threats that exist. So it's really important to understand your environment, and how you would respond from a business perspective, you know, if there was a threat or an action taken against your environment.
Thanks, Rob. The last question we got in was, as part of the Ukraine crisis, what can organizations do to continue to protect against destructive malware being used?
Well, and, that's a really timely question, right? Because we're seeing that now. We are seeing through, I guess it started at the end of February, that international outbreak between Russia and the Ukraine. But I think, there's a program called Shields Up, and really through CISA, which is through, Homeland Security. And so what they talk about in Shields Up is what we mentioned earlier, but in a more thorough way, I would think. And they have lists of what to do, and I would encourage folks who are concerned about this to visit the site. And it's really having cyber hygiene in place. It's to have your edge components patched, your rule sets understood, your configurations understood, your vulnerability scans in place, and not only in place, but patched afterwards. And it's basically doing all the things necessary to make sure you're providing for your enterprise from a cyber hygiene perspective. And, that kind of effort goes a long way to reducing risk. It also goes a long way for you to better understand your existing enterprise, because IT is a fluid activity. New things and new deployments take place all the time. And so it's important to have these areas understood, not only from an IT perspective, but from a business perspective. So I would encourage folks to look at the CISA site, the Shields Up initiative, and this will help a long way to improving your cyber defenses during this time.
Thanks, Rob. That's all the questions.
Great. Well,
Kat, thank you, Rob. Very informative session. I'm sorry, were you going to say something, Rob?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we have a survey, Joe, that I'd like folks to complete complete today's webinar, where we'll offer a complimentary Starbucks gift card, and that concludes today's session. And that CCSI can help strengthen your cyber defenses. Please contact your account managers for additional information. Joe, with that, I'll turn it over to you, and appreciate the time today.
Yeah, for all the attendees, thank you for your time today. And as Rob just mentioned, your account managers will be following up with you to discuss next steps. And again, the reminder is we appreciate your feedback with regard to the questionnaires. And this concludes today's event. Thank you again, and have a great day. Take care, everyone.